And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Hi there, I'm National Weather Service Meteorologist Peter Chan with your Alaska Marine Weather Outlook on this Saturday, January 11th, 2025. Checking the sea ice to start things off. We have extensive ice throughout the Chukchi Sea and along the Beaufort Sea coastline in the Arctic Ocean. Down through the Bering Strait, also plenty of ice in place. As we get further south, there at least has been a bit of a westward push of the ice, but that's going to be changing with the area of low pressure that's going to be riding northward and located at some point near or just west of Nome by mid-Monday morning. Of course, this has pulled warmer air north again, so ice that was trying to redevelop in Bristol Bay and Kuskokwim Bay, along with some stronger winds and wave action, has tended to melt and break that ice up in those locations. We also have another push of mild air and windy conditions up into the northern part of Cook Inlet, so the ice there will likely also melt a bit here over the next couple of days as temperatures rise to around or even above 40. So a powerful low as of this late Saturday night, early Sunday morning. We'll have a low down near 956 millibars just north of the eastern Aleutians up west there of Bristol Bay. This low is going to take a track further northward through the weekend and by Monday morning be located right around this area here just to the west of Nome. Strong front, high winds, plenty of moisture coming north up into the Gulf and into south central areas of the mainland. This front will have storm force winds along it. Areas like Turnagain Arm, upper hillside of Anchorage could have wind gusts as high as 75 to 100 miles per hour. And also as this front crosses the Alaska range, there'll be some high winds upwards of 80 miles an hour. And then by the time we get into Sunday afternoon, that low continues right along the outer Yukon Delta coastline. Wrap front around it, and that front continuing to lift northward and spread eastward, and that'll bring some more precipitation to the Panhandle. More importantly, though, later Monday, we're going to have another low come up out of the North Pacific, and that'll take aim along the northern Gulf Coast into the Panhandle, especially for Monday night and into the day on Tuesday. So it's going to stay an active weather pattern into early next week. Check out these winds Sunday. Inner channels of the Panhandle, south to southeast winds, 20 knots there, Dixon Entrance. They'll be a bit lighter in this area. 30 knots, Stevens Passage, Lynn Canal, 6-foot waves. But look, gale and storm force winds for the Gulf Coast. 35 to 40 knot gales, southerly gales there up through Sitka. Then they have 50 knot south to southeast gales outside there of Yakutat Bay to Cape Suckling, and waves building in excess of 20 to near 30 feet outside there of Yakutat Bay. Monday, of course, winds will come down. South winds 20-25 knots there for the inner channels, 4-foot waves, Lynn Canal, Stevens Passage, 14-foot waves down here in Dixon Entrance. For the outer coast, south-southeast winds south of Sitka, 30 knots, but still 35-knot easterly offshore flow there at Sitka, and then generally easterly winds 25 to 30 knots outside of Gustavus through Yakutat Bay, and waves still up around 20 feet. For Sunday, as this powerful front works its way northward, we're going to have winds upwards southeast 50 to 55 knot storm force winds within Prince William Sound and especially outside of Hinchinbrook entrance to Kayak Island. Waves 25 feet. We have 40-45 knot gales lower Cook Inlet, northeast of Kodiak Island and along the eastern Kenai with waves anywhere from 17 to near 25 feet. And on Monday, we find winds coming down, at least out over areas outside of Hinchinbrook entrance. South winds 25 knots, but still agitated, sees waves upwards and over 20 feet. Within Prince William Sound, southeast winds 20 knots, 4-foot waves. As we get down here toward the lower end of Cook Inlet, look for west to southwest winds 20 to 30 knots. Strongest there up through the middle and upper portions of Cook Inlet. And then on Sunday, as I mentioned, the storm has such a large and powerful low and mid-level wind field. Areas east side of Kodiak Island and east of Chicknick Sandpoint, we're looking at 45 to 50 knot storm force south winds. On the backside even, southeast 50-knot storm force winds here in that wider expanse of Bristol Bay. And then south winds 50 knots turning westerly to 50 knots north of Cold Bay. And waves on the North Pacific side, 18 to 20 feet, even higher east of Kodiak Island. And then areas down there north of Cold Bay could still be up around 15 to near 20 feet. So winds do come down considerably by Monday. We're looking at westerly winds 15 to 20 knots around Kodiak Island, generally west-southwest winds 15 to 20 knots on the North Pacific side, and more south-southwest winds 15 to 20 knots on the Bering side. We have west to northwest 35 to 40 knot gales across the eastern Aleutians on Sunday, and then winds generally out of the west-northwest around 25 to 30 knots, trailing out through the central and western Aleutians. For Monday, winds lighter variable, 10 knots around Unalaska, northeasterly 15 to 20 knots, Nikolsky through Atka, and then the winds shift back around to the west-northwest, 30 to 35 knots, especially as you get out there northwest of Kiska. And for Sunday, we have southeast winds of 30 knots in Bristol Bay, easterly winds in Kuskokwim Bay at 25 knots, and then 30-knot offshore winds out of Norton Sound on Sunday. There still could be a little ice movement to the west or south on Sunday. Northwest winds of 35 to 40 knot gales, St. Matthew down to the Pribilov Islands. And then on Monday, as that low pressure lifts further north, winds are going to turn southwesterly along the southwest coast. We have southwest winds of 25 knots into Bristol Bay and into Kuskokwim Bay and into Norton Sound, 30-knot southwest winds, also parallel there along the lower Yukon Delta coastline. Back to the west, westerly winds 30 knots, St. Matthew, northwest winds 20 knots at St. Paul and St. George. And finally, for the far north in Bering Strait, winds south of the Bering Strait will be northeasterly off of the Seward Peninsula to 25 knots, northwesterly 30 knots there around Gamble. And then through the lower portion are all along the Chukchi Sea coastline, generally an east to northeast wind upwards of 25 to 30 knots. We have winds out of the east 25 to 30 knots, Utqiagvik through Kaktovik, and then on Monday winds will let up. Look for south-southwest winds, Prudhoe Bay through Kaktovik, back to the further west. Northeast winds 20-25 knots all the way from Utqiagvik down to Point Hope through the Bering Strait. But on the other side of the Bering Strait, winds should have more of a southwesterly to westerly component at 25 to 30 knots. So we have a lot of active weather, active high seas, high winds. Please be safe and be careful out there and keep a close look on the weather and any updates to any changes in the forecast or any new warnings or advisories.